The images of the freed Israeli hostages strike a painfully familiar chord for my next guest, Mark Sweden. He was held wrongfully in a Chinese prison for 12 years before he was finally freed. He is speaking out tonight for the first time on television since his release from death row last year. Sweden was arrested while on a business trip in China in 2012 on drug trafficking charges that the State Department has long said were bogus. China, like Russia, detains Americans to use as bargaining chips and exchange them for convicted Chinese spies in this country. Sweden was held in deplorable conditions, a tiny, overcrowded cell with food so limited he lost 100 pounds behind bars. For years, his elderly mother was the only person trying to get him free, but attention around him did grow. Texas Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Randy Weber joined the campaign to free Sweden. President Biden also pressed for it. Even actor Mel Gibson joined the call, and I covered his story here on News Nation. Finally, last November, it happened. Sweden was freed along with 2 other American citizens in a Chinese prisoner swap. A thankful Mel Gibson did a shout out when he learned of Sweden's release.
I want to send my congratulations and indeed my thanksgiving in this season to a man named Mark Sweden, who was recently released from a Chinese prison. Of course, Elizabeth Vargas, who reported this story several times, and Allison Weiner. Thank you and congratulations to all of you. Big Thanksgiving.
And Mark Sweden joins me now. Mark, it's wonderful to finally meet you after covering your story for so long and to see you finally freed. But you've been very honest with our producer that your return the last 11 months has been really difficult.
Correct, indeed. It was difficult this morning already. We're just dealing with trying to collect some payments that were owed. There's a crime victims compensation that they're asking me for medical, for this, for that, from the Attorney General's office in Texas. And that's about, they sent me a check for $1,300 for 2 weeks' pay. My last tax I filed was $250,000.
Yeah, there's a lot of red tape when you disappear from every single system for 12 years. Yeah. You come back and people are like, what? Yeah,
5 months to get a driver's license, all kinds of little things. No credit, wiped out. Old friends disappear. Everything is wiped out. You're starting over from scratch at 50 years old now. So,
you were arrested while you were on this business trip to China. On the very last night of this trip, what happened? They just banged on your hotel room and took you into custody?
They didn't bang on it. They used a battering ram and broke it down with about 11 police officers with guns, speaking Chinese, screaming Chinese, and they were not uniformed. So they're shouting in my face in Chinese, pointing guns at me. I didn't know what's going on. There's nothing in my room. There's nothing with me. And basically just dragged me out. After about an hour in the room of searching the room, they dragged you to a bus down in the parking garage and took me to a basketball court an hour or 2 away. And they started bringing a bunch of other people there we didn't know each other. Well, I didn't know them. And they drove us another 5 or 6 hours away in the middle of the night and took us to a police station. We wouldn't tell anybody where they were going, wouldn't do anything. And then the next, the sun's rising already, and, they pull out some questionnaires and start asking about drugs and this and that. No translators, no anything, and giving you statements to sign in Chinese, which I refuse. So I was already thrown into the fight right there because one of them slapped me in the face.
Yeah.
Man, it got ugly, and I came back, and there's 5 or 6 of them fighting me at the same time in there, and I didn't know what was going on. I refused to sign anything in Chinese.
You were eventually, even though you refused to sign the form, you were eventually tried and found guilty in what the United States government said was a sham trial. But then in 2019, they sentenced you to death. Did you really believe that they would execute you for this?
Actually, they sentenced me to death twice. And the UN did it. The UN found me not guilty. They started on 2017. They had a hearing in Geneva, and they declared China to release me and pay me compensation immediately. And that's when the U.S. really started getting involved.
So the United Nations got involved before the United States.
Yes, I have the declaration here.
So the conditions that you endured during the 12 years you were on death row in China were appalling. You shared a small cell with 30 men. You slept on a concrete floor. The lights were on 24/7. You say you wrapped a T-shirt around your eyes to keep out the light. And you were given only a small bowl of rice twice a day with a piece of pork fat on top.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
You lost 100 pounds. How is that possible?
It was fast too. This is unedible. And there's no running water in there. There's no windows. There's no outside time. There's no toilets. There's no facility. They don't give you any clothing to wear aside from that vest you saw in those pictures. So you got to supply your own clothes. The weather gets below freezing and above 120 Fahrenheit in there in the summer. So it's bad.
And then suddenly, last November, the guards early one morning come into your cell. It's still dark. You say you actually thought they were taking you to the firing squad, but instead they took you to the American ambassador, Nick Burns.
What they did first, actually, is they came about 6 months before and did that. And they took me, I thought, okay, they said, okay, we're going somewhere. And they actually took me to court. So that court, we actually went and they said, now we know this is 11 years and 6 months in. 11 years of this was in a detention camp, which is highly illegal. And I'm the only person in history besides Bin Laden's bodyguard to stay in a detention camp that long. They dragged me to a makeshift court real quick. And all of a sudden they said, oh, we know you didn't make or sell drugs, but we think you wrote on a ferry boat. Granted, these things hold thousands of people, these ferries, from Macau to China with one of these suspects. No evidence of it, no nothing. So we give you life in prison. That was first. That's what they did first. And then 6 months later, that's when they took me and dragged me, black bag. Even the police that were with me, they blacked out the cars, they blacked out everybody. They even put those guys in Beijing prison with me. And then they blacked us all the way to a makeshift courtroom that was actually the tarmac, VIP lounge on the tarmac in Beijing airport.
The ambassador brought you home on an airplane, an American airplane, and you basically came home to a life that had moved on.
Yes.
During the 12 years you were held, your mom had to sell your house in order to fund the efforts to get you back from China. You had no job.
Yeah, she's had to sell everything. We spent over $1 million on the lawyers just in China. They're completely useless.
$1 million on lawyers?
Yeah, over $1 million on lawyers, and they're completely useless.
And your mom is not a wealthy person. She basically sold everything she could.
Right. Yeah, came home to basically nothing. You've been to my mom's place where she was at while I was gone.
Yeah, and I've talked to your mom several times. So how is it, I asked this question as we watch, for example, in Israel yesterday, all those hostages being freed after 2 years of horrific captivity in these tunnels underground, 2 years of torture. You had 12 years. How does a human being recover from something like that?
Well, I'm still recovering. I'm just trying to get it together. It's just not as easy. It's going to be tough for them,
What's hard? Tell me what you can you sleep? Can you?
Well, sleeping is a real
you
problem.
told one of our producers that you have a hard time sleeping in a bed because you were so accustomed to sleeping on a concrete floor.
That is correct. As soon as I got into bed, it just seems too soft to me now. I'll get up and kind of wander around or go onto the sofa or go, sometimes just go onto the floor because I just can't sleep. That's my major problem. One of the major problems. My eyesight went because 24-hour lights and no sunlight.
Yeah.
Just a lot of things. My weight, the way I'm putting it back on or off. My eating habits. Everything's. My clock's messed up completely. Everything's messed up.
Your mom has set up a GoFundMe page for folks who might want to help you get back on your feet. We know that you were taken and used as a pawn by the government of China in order for them to be able to get a couple of their convicted spies back. It is a tough road for anyone to come out of what you've been through, Mark. I wish you nothing but success. I hope
Thank you.
things get better soon, and I'm so glad to see you back in Texas. Give your mom my
Um,
best.
I will do that. I'll talk to you again soon.
I
Thank you,
hope
Lady.
so. All right, take care, Mark.